Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on self-publishing and building your author business. Before I dive in, I'd like to extend our thanks that is Trish and my thanks, to Stuart Grant and his organization, Digital Authors Toolkit, for making tickets to the self-publishing show in London earlier this month available to Trish and me through a draw. I'll be using what we learned at the self-publishing show, the SPS, as the basis for this webinar today. Now, there was a hell of a lot to take in. It was just a one-day seminar, one-day conference, but I took extensive notes, and I'll be referring to them pretty much throughout the webinar. It's going to work like this. I'm going to give a little introduction to each section, and then I'm going to invite you to ask questions. So as questions occur to you, as I jabber away, maybe you should just note them in the chat box. And then during the gaps when I'm not talking, or at least when I've run out of my prepared notes, I'll see what I can do to answer them. And if I'm not technically savvy enough to answer them, then fortunately I have Trish with me on the other computer. She's hidden at the moment, but she's there to answer the more complex technical questions that I can't. All right, we are living through nothing short. Oh, there's one other thing I'd like to say before I begin, and that is if there are any indie authors amongst you, authors who are already running a business, selling their books, writing and selling and marketing their books, then I'd love you to identify yourself as such in the chat and comment on whatever I might say during the course of the webinar. So the fact is that we're living through nothing short of a publishing revolution at the moment. And Trish and I have found ourselves right in the middle of it. Because for 15 years, I've been writing a weekly blog called Monday Motivation, which some of you might read. I've written nearly 600 of them so far, and we realized that there was value locked away in this trove of mini essays that I've been writing. So Trish and I are publishing 6 collections of these, each with a companion workbook to help readers translate advice into action. So we're doing that. We haven't sought a publisher. We haven't sought an agent. We are publishing them ourselves. And at the same time, I've come into a very productive period of my working career. I'm writing a series of cozy murder mysteries. These are relatively modest stories of, say, 60 to 70,000 words, featuring an amateur detective who lives, as we do, in a houseboat on a lake in the UK. I'm busy with the third one in that series at the moment, and I'm planning to write 6 in total, or should I say to begin with. It takes me about 2 months to plan and write each story. So you can do the arithmetic. This will give us 18 books to work with by about June next year. The first 3 volumes of our craft, creativity, and writing series, I'm going to give you a glimpse of a cover that we've had designed for that. Can you see that? We've had the three first volumes designed by a professional book cover designer. Plus their matching, those 3 plus their matching workbooks will be published in the next month or so. So this journey that we've been making into indie publishing has led us to research this industry like crazy for at least the past year. And it was crowned with our visit to the SPS in London last week. So the publishing revolution is, as I said, extraordinary. The latest figures that I've got, or that the people at the SBS had, in the US alone in 2022, 1.7 million books were self-published. 1.7 million, compared to just 10,000 new titles by traditional publishers in 2023, the next year. We don't have a direct comparison. The global self-publishing market is projected to exceed $20 billion this year. And self-published authors now capture 51% of all ebook sales. So the independent publishing revolution has already taken the castle, if you like. And here's the game changer that we should all bear in mind, and that I'm pretty sure you've all thought about. While traditional publishers offer authors royalties that range between 10 and 15%, usually 10, self-publishing platforms allow you to keep 70% or even 100% of your net profits. But with that higher percentage comes something that traditional publishing never required of you. You must become the CEO of your own publishing company. And that's what this seminar is, this webinar is about. Now for the really, if that hasn't daunted you, here's a daunting bit. Research shows that successful self-published authors typically need 8 to 10 books before they're truly established, which is exactly why we have these plans for 18 books initially. Of course, if you have any of them translated, that constitutes more editions. So you could write one book and have it translated into 20 languages and you'd be cruising. The cost of professional self-publishing, again, research reveals, ranges between $3,000. Sorry, all the costs are in dollars in today's webinar, range from about $3,000 to $5,000 per book. But you should understand that this isn't an expense, it's a business investment. So the great challenge is we learned how to write. We were never trained to run a business. We learned to craft compelling stories, but nobody taught us about market analysis or brand development or customer acquisition. Yet these skills have become as essential as mastering plot structure. Writers have also become accustomed to writing at a fairly leisurely pace. A new book out every 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. We forget that some of the most accomplished writers in history and some of the most successful writers today wrote and write prodigiously. So Trollope wrote 47 novels, and his novels were all enormous things, doorstoppers, 1,000 pages long. Stephen King has written 65 novels and novellas. Nora Roberts has written 225 novels. One of the Indian authors that we follow closely has written 38 books in the last decade. But think, even that is fairly slow. It's 2 or 3 or 4 books a year. Although Roberts, I have to say, is a phenomenon. And at her peak, she was writing 10 a year. But the point about these writers is that when they've written one, they immediately start another one. They don't stop. And they don't stop not only because they're trying to fill their bank balances, they don't stop because they love it. I mean, we have to remind ourselves, we're in this business because we love to write, not because we want to earn a fortune. Another statistic, the self-publishing industry has grown 264% in 5 years. And it's not unusual these days to come across six-figure author businesses. That is, six figures measured in pounds or dollars. So that's a lot of money, 100,000 plus pounds or dollars a year by people who have written and have self-published. So Trish and I are not that hungry or ambitious. I mean, six figures sounds great, but it sounds too much like hard work for us. So I think we're to have sales in the mid five figures. £1,000 a year does sound like small potatoes to us. To say to understate the case. So that's what today's webinar is about. Hopefully we'll help you transform your thinking from I'm a writer hoping to get published to I'm an author running a strategic publishing business. We'll share some of the essential business skills, marketing strategies, and systems you need, not just to participate in the self-publishing revolution, but to profit from it. So in 2025, the question isn't whether you can afford to learn these business skills. It's whether you can afford not to. Are you ready to become not just a better writer, but a successful author entrepreneur? Okay, so that's the end of my introduction to the subject. I've just got to check to see whether you have been assiduously and dutifully writing down some questions. Let's have a look. No, I don't see any questions yet. Am I blind, Trish?
No, but a whole stack of people have said.
I've been so fascinating that you haven't had a chance to frame a question. But not to worry, I'm going to dash straight on then. But do remember, if one does occur to you while I talk, just put it in the chat. So before we start talking business, I mean, we have to remember that the foundation of any successful author business is built upon the books you write. And that requires craft. So you can't run a sustainable business selling books that people don't enjoy reading. This is so fundamental that it's sometimes overlooked entirely in discussions about indie publishing success. But it shouldn't be. And at the self-publishing show, one of the speakers, a writer called Innes Johnson, delivered a lecture, a talk on how to hook your readers and reel them in. And really, it was a case of going back to basics and talking about what makes readers buy your books. And she broke it down into 5 simple, well, they're not that simple, but 5 requirements, 5 necessities. And I'm going to pass over them quite quickly. Remember, I'm going to send you these notes in full. So if I telegraph some of the messages, they're there in full in the notes. The first thing that any writer has to do is create empathy in the reader for your character. Your protagonist needs to have standout qualities that make them memorable, balanced with ordinary flaws that make them human. Readers don't connect with perfect heroes. They connect with characters who feel real, who struggle with the kinds of struggles that we all do every day. We like to like characters in our fiction. The second thing is a book doesn't glue your readers to the page if they're not aware of the big question, the big story question that it is attempting to answer. Your character, your protagonist must be absolutely committed to solving the central mystery or achieving the primary goal of your story. So whether they're seeking the Holy Grail or finding love or hunting a killer, this commitment drives everything forward. Without genuine stakes and unwavering determination in your protagonist, readers simply lose interest. 3, you have to build a vivid world. Your setting has to be so richly realized that your readers can step into it, they can immerse themselves in it, and forget that they're reading entirely. They should feel the fog on the lake where my detective lives. They should smell the old books in the mystery in the library, or sense the tension in the coffee shop in the romance that they're reading. Her 4th point, she talked about fun and games, and I was a little puzzled by what she meant by you've got to have some real fun and games in your novel. And I realized she was talking about the complications, the subplots, the excitement, the daredevil moments when you're, and of course the dark moments when your protagonist confronts their inner demons. So those dark moments where external conflicts force characters to face their deepest fears and flaws create the emotional depth that makes stories unforgettable. And she said something else that I also thought was well worth remembering. She said, don't forget the grand gesture. Every compelling story needs at least one moment where everything's on the line, where your protagonist makes a choice or takes an action that fundamentally changes everything. So, in 5 steps, I think if you manage to get all of those going, you would be doing very well. So this business of craft connects directly to the running of an author business. Because what you're doing is you're creating experiences that your readers crave. I mean, readers crave your particular brand of storytelling. If they do, that will become the foundation of a sustainable author business. They will recognize your voice, they will recognize your name, and they will buy your books because they know what kind of experience they will have reading it. So don't ever forget that. Everything we will talk about from now on is predicated on the assumption that you have written a story that readers can't put down. And the fact is, of those, was it 1.7 million stories that have been self-published on Amazon in 2022? I have to say that well over 1 million, well over 1.5 million will not have achieved these objectives. So you put yourself in the running if you write a book that people really love. For my cozy murder mysteries, I've developed a character based not on me specifically, but on my experience of being disabled. I had polio as a child. I used crutches to get around, and I whiz about in a mobility scooter. And the series will be called The series title is The Mobility Scooter Murders. And my character, James Clatterbridge, has a dry sense of humor. He frequently makes faux pas. He often sticks his nose into the affairs of his fellow Marina residents. So he has flaws aplenty, but he's also self-deprecating and kind. And when he's...
We put a light on.
Could you remember to turn off your sound? And when his wife Inky reminds him to be, he is generous. And I'm hoping readers will fall in love with him. Because if they don't, I don't have an author publishing business. Okay, so craft lies at the basis of any business. Okay, I'm hoping that I'm going to find a question. Oh, that's a terrible point. Who was it? That, yes, now I've got millions of questions. Somebody reminded me or told me, I wasn't aware of this, that Amazon goes along with the South African tax authorities and so will only pay writers in South Africa 35% and not 70%. I hope that's not true, but if it is true, it makes your job harder. Christine says, where did the term indie come from and what does it mean? It simply means independent, Christine. And ironically, it's an independent publisher, but the subject of that sentence is an author. So it's an independently published author. Trish says that AI, I think it's probably Claude or ChatGPT, it originates in the broader indie movement in entertainment, particularly music and film. It signifies a shift towards independent production and distribution, challenging the traditional dominance of major corporations. Indie author specifically refers to authors who self-publish their work, retaining creative control and often managing their own publishing business. Mandy asks, are there any stats on how many of the indie authors currently publishing are actually making money? Yes, you're right. There's a lot of talk about the six-figure authors, but having some proof from an institution such as Nielsen would be valuable. I remember at the London Book Fair last year, they released, Trish, can you remember which organization did the survey? They surveyed
I've put the link in, Richard. It's the Alliance of Independent Authors.
Okay,
Scroll
and they worked out, I mean, they took as their cutoff point, they said anyone who spends more than half their time, i.e., 4 hours a day, more than 4 hours a day, writing and marketing their books, qualifies as a potential indie author. And a surprising number of those authors were earning reasonable money. In other words, more than, I can't remember the exact figures, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more than 18 or 20,000 pounds a year. All right, so that's a long way from being a six-figure author, but it's entirely respectable. And I think that they also did a comparison with traditionally published authors, and they discovered that for the first time, indie authors, on average, i.e., those people spending more than 4 hours a day on the job, are earning more than the average traditionally published writer. Okay. Yeah, so the age-old question, says Liz, how do you get people to read your book so they fall in love with it and then sells? With so much competition, even good books can disappear in the crowd. Well, that's what we're talking about today. How can you stop your great book from disappearing in the crowd? I mean, the point is that it's not easy. it takes a lot of work. You know, there are a great many writers, indie writers, who make a lot of money, who spend as much time on their writing as they do, at least on their marketing, as they do on their writing. People like Joanna Penn, who's she's a prolific writer, and she's an extremely prolific marketer. So she holds podcasts, she does all sorts of promotional work to support her books. Paul Kilfoyle's point is very true. A striking cover is very important. There's nothing we think as much of a giveaway as a poorly designed cover. You can tell immediately that it's the work of an indie writer who didn't want to spend the money on a professional designer. It really is worth spending that money. I mean, the proof's in the pudding for us still, we have to admit, but the covers that we've had designed, I think, are every bit as good as any covers in any bookstore. And I think that is a kind of a must-have, because you are competing with all the books in the bookstore, even if your book doesn't appear there. John Clark says, what are the advantages and disadvantages of self-publishing? I've written a non-fiction biography on Black Sash legend Molly Blackburn and have a publisher eager to publish, but I need to pay the publisher 60,000 Rand upfront for the benefit of professional copy editing, cover design, layout, and distribution. I mean, John, I know which publisher it is, and I'm surprised at that. That is very much a kind of hybrid agreement then. But it makes you wonder about what the advantages of a publisher if you are bearing so much of the expense involved. So you've raised most of that money from a crowdfunding campaign. Well, that's good. I guess you could also raise that kind of money to fund your self-published book. So I think that the answer to your initial question, what are the advantages and disadvantages of self-publishing, will become apparent over the course of this webinar. So I'm not going to try and answer them now. Dimitri, the first point under craft, which you missed, will be in the notes, and you'll be getting them in the next day or two. So I'm not going to go back to that. Yes, Paul says a publisher who wants 60,000 to publish your book is a vanity press, not a publisher. Well, John, at least Paul, this is an established publisher in South Africa. So what publishers are perhaps finding is that in order to stay afloat, they have to share the burden with their authors. But it doesn't seem fair to me, given the fact that the author has such a small proportion of the profits, if there are profits. Okay, what are the best online bookstore outlets that I can use in South Africa, asks Frankie.
Richard, we've answered that. I think we must move on now.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't
Christine
hear the answer to
Stoneman,
that.
why are so many Christine Stoneman said, but why are so many self-published works lame, dull, excessively wordy, and half-edited? Well, those are, fortunately, those are the 1.69 million books that Amazon published last year, or in 2022. And that's why we have to take especial care not to fall into that category, I guess. Let's use it as a spur to action. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next section, which is called Writing to Market, which sounds at first glance like you find out what people want and then you give them what they want. You should abandon your creative vision and simply manufacture whatever you think readers want. Well, at the self-publishing show, a guy called Alex Newton developed a presentation on this. And he said it's far more complicated and far more sophisticated than that. It's all about strategic marketing, market positioning. And it's kind of obvious. If you've been in business, if you've been involved in marketing of any kind, you know that if you are offering a product to a market, whatever that product is, you have to research the market thoroughly. You have to work out how to position your stories. You have to work out how to price not your story or product. You have to learn how to price your product well. You have to identify what specific niche it will serve. You have to work out what your buyers expect of the product that you're offering them, and you have to give them what they expect. And that does not mean simply capitulating to whatever the latest trend suggests you should do. But the fact is we operate in a supply and demand economy. The point was made by a couple of you that the market is hugely saturated with self-published books. Tens of thousands of new titles every year. The Kindle store is, well, you've seen it. I don't need really to say very much about it. It's not a gentle and creative marketplace. It's a crowded battlefield where visibility is everything. And the growth of supply is growing ever more rapidly. So how do you make it findable? You have to use ebook. I'm talking now about ebooks rather than hard copy books. You have to use market intelligence that tells you where the buyers are and tells you what the buyers expect and tells you what buyers want. And then you will choose, you should choose, I can't see a good reason not to do this, to write your books using all of your creative flair, all of the inspiration you can muster, all of the strategic design decisions that you need to create a good book, to meet those expectations. Now, lots of that ebook market intelligence comes at a price, some of it quite a high price, but some is free. And I just want to run over a couple. They're in the notes. K-Lytics is one. That is the company founded and run by Alex Newton himself. It provides detailed market intelligence on the Amazon Kindle market. If you want to know more about that, you can consult the K-Lytics website. Then there are other author-focused tools which include Kindlepreneur, Publisher Rocket. These are very like K-Lytics for keyword and category research. They help you identify less competitive niches on Amazon. You can read Jane Friedman's regular blog, where she publishes articles and refers you to articles and analyses on ebook statistics, market trends, self-publishing data, aggregating information from various sources, and that is free. if you are already publishing through Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, you will have access to their own sales dashboards showing the sales volume and rank of your books. And then, of course, there are KDP community and Reddit forums, which are platforms that often feature discussions where authors share observations, ask questions, and sometimes share anecdotal data or interpretations of market trends. So writers do write with passion for personal fulfillment or to establish authority in their field. There's no question about that. But we are focusing on how to make money from that activity. That does not diminish the creative value of the work. It simply acknowledges that if you want to build a sustainable author business, you must understand the commercial landscape in which you're operating. So the authors who thrive in today's market aren't necessarily the most talented writers. They're the ones who combine solid craft with strategic market awareness. They understand their competition, they've read their competition, they keep their eye on their competition's ranking in Amazon. They know their readers' expectations, and they position their books where they can be discovered by the right audience at the right time. And you will learn the answers to all of those questions by keeping a very close eye on the data that is available in the sources that I've identified. So in writing The Mobility Scooter Murders, I have to bear in mind all the tropes of the cozy murder mystery. I also have to bear in mind, by the way, that it is a vastly overtraded market. It became very big with the publication of the Thursday Murder Club books and Richard Cole's books and books by 20 maybe to 100 writers who have established sustainable businesses in the field. But I keep telling myself when I get depressed and I think, well, this is a mug's game. I'm going to be writing 6 books over the next year that might never sell. How am I going to compete? How are people going to find them? And I remind myself that the market is enormous. It is absolutely enormous. If there are 100 writers making 6-figure incomes in this particular field alone, which I doubt, by the way, but if there were, the market is 100 million of speakers in various languages. The market in Britain for cozy murder mysteries is probably 5 million people. And a lot of those people read lots of books. So it's not as though they read 1 book a year. Have you heard of the phenomenon of the whale? The whale is the reader who reads a book in her chosen niche every day. So I say, let's make sure that the whale doesn't go extinct. So I keep a very close eye on the tropes of the cozy murder mystery. It takes place in a community, a cozy community where everyone knows each other, a marina. There's no overt sex. And although there's a murder, there's no overt violence either. It takes place in an appealing location. We live on a lake. We're surrounded by water and ducks and beautiful and swans. The victim should not be too likable is another trope that you'll find true in almost every cozy murder. The sleuth will have a hobby or an occupation that regularly diverts him and amuses the reader. James Clatterbridge writes horror stories for a living. So I'm hoping. Okay. That is all I have to say about writing to market. Let me see what you have said. So Mandy says the romance ebook market is probably more flooded than most genres. Yet, as I said, romance readers are voracious readers. So I keep writing. I mean, and the other fact you've got to remember is the romance niche, although it's not one niche anymore, it's got multiple sub-niches, subgenres. But romance as a whole, I think the last statistic I read suggested that over half of all fiction in America is romance. But then you get lesbian romance, you get horror romance, you get what is the mix between fantasy, romancy? There are literally hundreds of subgenres that you can find in Amazon, actually. Yes, one of the differences, Liz says, is that the market has far more sub-niches than bookstores. Well, that's because bookstores don't have miles and miles and miles and miles of shelves, which, of course, Amazon does. Colleen said a little enigmatically, does anyone know of Books By and how they compare to Amazon? Colleen, can you clarify that question? Romantasy. Thank you, Mandy. I have to confess that I have not read a romantasy. I do like
clarify my
fantasy.
question.
The advent, she adds, of BookTok was exceptionally good for romance writers. Well, one of the talks that I'm not going to discuss today, but I've included notes from it in the notes, and you can read it when you get them, is on TikTok as a platform to promote your book, whether or not it's romance. We had an exceptionally enthusiastic advocate of TikTok. And he made it sound quite feasible to make your 3 videos a day for a month and to promote your book. Okay. So the next section is...
Sorry, can I ask my question about books.by?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so a friend of mine has just signed up with books.by, and it's like Amazon apparently, but she says you get you pay an amount per year, and you get the full cost of the book that you're selling. So you put your books on there.
What is it called?
Books.by. And,
okay.
So I was just wondering if you knew about it and if you know anything about how it compares.
Trish, do you know about that?
No, I've seen it, but I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
There are a lot of sort of hybrid book publishers springing up all over the place that sit somewhere between the traditional publisher and an indie publisher, where they offer authors, considerably more than the traditional publisher offers them. I want to rush on because there is, So what people at the SBS were really saying, what the kind of driving energy behind the SBS was, that writers who are serious about making a living from writing have to think of a cycle. And the cycle is simply, it's a simple one. It's like a goldfish going round and round a bowl. You write, you publish, you market, and you repeat. And the more you do all three of those things, the better you will get at all three of those things. That you will make mistakes, as I'm sure Trish and I are going to make mistakes. But you will learn from your mistakes. And because you've got another book that you've been busy writing, you can test your new knowledge on the new book. And I think that that is a kind of Darwinian view of marketing. You evolve. You evolve through making mistakes. You have in your writing. You see what works. You focus on what works. If you use one book designer, book cover designer, and that sells more books than the other one, then you will use him or her in future. If you write urban fantasy in this one and whatever in the next one, and the one outsells the first consistently over time, then you will say to yourself, well, I really like writing urban fantasy. Let me focus on that. And likewise with the marketing. If you learn that a particular technique, whether it's TikTok, using TikTok, or whether it's ads on Facebook, or whatever it is, what works, you will focus on. And over time, if you keep producing the books, you can only expect to start being noticed, to start. And there comes a point with every one of the authors whose podcasts we've listened to or whose blogs we've read and who are genuinely successful, there comes a time when their career takes off. And suddenly they realize that they've reached what in science fiction would be called escape velocity. You know, they're escaping the gravity of the unnoticed book. So in the section called Write, Publish, Market, Repeat, 3 authors were interviewed by a publisher, and we've included some of the wisdom, and it's good. But I wanted to use the time that we've got available to talk about a talk by David Viergutz, who is a horror writer, as it happens, and a very successful one. He's also pioneered another publishing venture entirely, where he sends letters every week to subscribers. And the letters are very carefully written as part of an ongoing story. Each one ends, of course, with a cliffhanger. And the letters are dressed up. They look like genuine letters. They're in handwriting. They're in apparently typewritten. And he's gathered together, I don't know, an astonishing number of people, 10, 20,000, each of whom pay him $100 a year for these letters to be sent to them. But he talked about taking direct control of your author business, of sticking to direct sales. In other words, not using Amazon, not using any of Trish, does he use any of the platforms?
I don't think so. He's got his own warehouse. So I think it's
So he's got a warehouse, and he's developed a funnel system that funnels inquiries that he's provoked online through advertising and other means. And these inquiries through, he's got a sales magnet. He offers people something for free that they really would like. I've written a novella that we're going to offer for nothing, set in Clatterbridge's universe. He does that, and he sends the hard copy books directly to buyers, and his books are available online through him. And instead of taking 70% of the royalties, he takes 100% of the royalties. And he is doing exceptionally.
Yeah, we seem to have lost Richard. But I wondered, Mandy, while we wait for Richard to get back on, it would be great if you chatted a bit about your experience with your self-publishing journey. Are you there, Mandy?
Yes, I am. I'm not sure what you want me to chat about because I'm not qualified as a six-figure author in any way, shape, or form, not even in rands.
I don't think that matters, but you've done it and you've got experience. So maybe just talk us through what you've done and where you've got your books up, and how did you start?
Well, I started writing. I actually followed one of Amanda Patterson's courses in 2000 and something, and then thought about writing for a very long time. Started several books, didn't finish any, and then in 2018, I decided, no, this is nonsense. I must finish a book.
Yeah.
And the experience gained from actually finishing a book is unimaginable. As if there's anybody out there who hasn't actually finished a book, do yourself a favor and finish a book, because that experience in itself is such a wonderful learning experience. But when it comes to self-publishing, I'm a control freak, and control has come up a couple of times in Richard's talk. And for me, it's very important. I don't want a cover with a red head on it if my heroine is blonde. And I know they'll tell you till the cows come home that it doesn't make any difference what she looks like on the cover. For me, it's incorrect, and I can't get over that. So So I'm in KU, Kindle Unlimited, which means I cannot sell on other platforms. And I've made a conscious decision to do that, to try and gain readers and loyal readers at that. In the hope that I'll then know, once I know fully what I'm doing and I've got a reader base going on Amazon, then I'll try and duplicate that experience in the other platforms.
Yeah.
But it's I like being in control.
But a lot of people we've heard speak are, especially if they write in a genre, a good genre, they are on Kindle Unlimited. And then they might distribute hard copies, either direct or, go wide with the hard copies.
Yeah. I print paperbacks here locally in South Africa.
Yeah.
And I sell them through I've got a street team of ladies who love my books, and they rave about them on TikTok and everywhere else. And that's how I sell my books here locally. I also, funnily enough, sell a lot of books at Comic-Con.
Oh, okay.
Comic-Con.
Mandy, can I ask how many books you've written?
I've written 7. At the moment, published 5. Got the rights back from an anthology story on book 6. So I'm self-publishing that one now. And then number 7 is 2 chapters away from being fully edited, and then I shall publish that one as well. But
Excellent.
You mentioned earlier 8 to 10 books. When I started, I heard 7 to 10 books. So I've stuck to that. I will not spend any money on marketing until I've got 10 books, because the backlist is imperative.
So guys, hear that. Hear that. That really is, it's a fact. It's a fact.
Yeah. And like you said, it's a business. Why would you throw money down the drain when you've only got 1 or 2 books that you can get your return on? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. It's like having a motor car manufacturing company and you only have one model, say a Tesla. Anyway, okay. Can I just, sorry about disappearing down the proverbial, but David Viergut says that taking direct control of your business in this way, not abandoning, not giving over anything to any other platform, means that you accomplish 2 very important facts. The first I've talked about, dramatically higher revenue per sale. And the second thing is even more important in his estimation, and that is you have complete ownership of your customer data. When you're on Kindle Unlimited or when you're using Amazon as a primary or even a major distributor of your books, Amazon keeps the details of the people who buy your books. So you never find out who they are, and they won't give them to you. They don't tell you that you have you're hitting people in a particular region. So if you're selling them yourselves, then you know that information, and you're more able then to adjust your creation and your marketing to fit your understanding of the people who love your books. Okay. So there's much more in the notes that you will get. And of course, you will also get a copy of the video. And I hope you've enjoyed this. We will, I guess, Trish, in time, let you know whether we've gone down the plug, which I don't think we will, or whether we are earning millions and millions of, well, maybe not pounds, but something.